For this very important discussion, we have with us Maheen Pracha. Maheen is a member of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, and we would hopefully get to talk to her about otherization of minorities, of how the communalism, how factionalism in Pakistan in recent times has heightened or not. We have Dr. Ayra Indrias Patras, who is an academic from the Forman Christian College in Lahore. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk to her about a perspective of gender or of her academic work. We have Desai from India, who's a human rights activist, we welcome you, and is a very well-known human rights activist, and of course, in the region, perhaps India, or India's example, first of as a democracy, and sadly, in the past few years, of maybe what they will talk about. We have Shreen Saroor from Sri Lanka, who's again a very well-known activist, who's the co-founder of Women Action Network. Again, Sri Lanka, we'll talk to her about, because Sri Lanka is a country which has dealt with this question in a way that very few countries has, or has been confronted with it, both in the war period and now in recent times, and we'll hopefully get a chance to understand that context from Shreen better. We have Md.Tajul Islam, who's an advocate of the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, who again is a very well-known lawyer, human rights expert, and he'll focus on Bangladesh. And again, there is a historical trajectory of Bangladesh, both from its inception to where it's now, which the question of communalism, the question of factionalism is inherent in the journey of Bangladesh. So maybe I'll begin with Shreen from Sri Lanka, from the Sri Lankan perspective, because as I said, what Sri Lanka has seen a violent conflict in a way that very few countries have, and that was essentially a question of communalism. And in the post-war period, there was a moment, let's say post-2009, where it looked, there was a reconstruction, transitional justice moment, and then we saw the Easter bombing and what came after that. And coming to the question of the title of this session, of the role of the state. And as I said, the state can have two roles, or perhaps three roles. It could be neutral. It could actually try and curb communalism and maintain harmony, or the state could inadvertently or advertently, as a policy, encourage, incite, enable communalism. So Shreen, I mean, and we are on a time constraint. I'm very sorry to say that, but I request everybody to take, let's say, 5 minutes for their remarks. I know these are the big questions, but Shreen, we're again delighted to have you here, and if you could talk about the Sri Lankan perspective.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'll quickly go into the subject. So Sri Lanka, the post-independent Sri Lanka, our first constitution, that Republican constitution, got away with some of the guards the minority communities had in 1948 constitution. 1972 constitution of Sri Lanka brought in the single only, and that I put a platform for the ethnic conflict in the country. Again, 1978 constitution brought in a privileged position for Sinhala Buddhism. That the state leader has to protect and promote Buddhism as the religion of the country. And today that has been the problem with regard to Sri Lankan constitution, having 22nd amendment to the constitution. It's all about executive president and how the executive president could safeguard singular Buddhist country. So in that context, time and time again, Sri Lankan political leadership has played communalism as a card to divide and rule the country the way that they want. As you all know, most recently, anti-Muslim and anti-terror discourses amplified by the global war on terrorism have been an important driver of the state-sponsored communalism in Sri Lanka. Although singular Buddhist nationalists initially chose to brand the Tamil community with the terrorist label, it was easy to turn the same label against the Muslims with various actors once again pushing for the solution based on militarization. That's something that I want to reiterate. Sri Lankan military is 99% singular Buddhist military. Significantly, regime consolidation drawn on patterns of discourses focused on terrorism and national security, giving prominence to the state security establishment. In this way, the fluid relationship among ideological projects, public discourses, state institution, electoral politics, and geopolitics have influenced the dynamic of communalism in Sri Lanka. And it's very interestingly that Sri Lanka has come up with laws that are highly problematic. If I have time, I would like to draw some of the legal aspect of these laws and how it is impacting minority communities. Having said that, I also want to kind of direct it to a positive note. I mean, Sri Lanka's economy, the current economic and political crisis didn't come just because the previous president took over the country or any, so time and time again, post militarization and governance failure. And there comes the end of the war, where huge colossal damage was done to the minority Tamil community. A war crime has been committed in my country. No proper investigation has been done. There have been quite a lot of corrupt in the name of transitional justice. And then you see the human rights violation, immunity given to the leaders, and the leaders wanted to continue with the immunity because of the crime that they have committed. Then thereafter, corruption and collapse of this country. Right now, Sri Lanka, with the inflation that's 100% and the food inflation is 300%, Sri Lanka is a failed nation. Why? Because we have forgotten some of the good things that we need in 1948 constitution, and also like forgotten what has happened to the minorities and how the country leaders have been playing this national security card, and also the terrorism jargon. So I will stop with that, and I will move forward if I get a question with regard to the legal aspect and the post-Easter context. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shreen. No, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about this in greater detail as well. And I'll now move to Dev Desai. As I said, India does have an outsized role in the region. As I said, firstly, as an example of a democracy, and we'll of a secular democracy, a federal secular democracy in the region. And to some of us, looking from the outside, the speed at which the institutions of democracy, of secularism, of tolerance have been attacked, and I don't want to, it's not for me to say sort of dismantled or not, this, is quite incredible. I mean, it's incredibly worrying. But so you have worked on this issue, and I mean, in Gujarat and elsewhere, or all of India. And what's the role of states? I mean, because the topic is so wide, in bringing that about. So it is just that the state, the secular state in India, became neutral and stopped sort of, were pushing secularism, or was it something else? And now we're seeing a state actually enabling something like communalism or factionalism. Over to you, Dev.
या थैंक यू सो मच. मुझे यहाँ पे मैं हिंदी में बात करूँगा, तो मैं जिनको हिंदी नहीं समझ में आता उनकी माफ़ी मांगना चाहता हूँ सबसे पहले.
आप बिल्कुल.
मैं सबसे पहले जो बात करूँगा क्योंकि ये सब्जेक्ट इतना बड़ा है कि इसके ऊपर 1 घंटा भी बात की जा सकती है, जो इंडिया के हालात है उसमें। पर इसको मैं बहुत शॉर्ट में अगर शुरू करूं तो हिंदुस्तान को जब आज़ादी मिली, उस आज़ादी में क्योंकि हमारे पड़ोसी मुल्क अभी जो बटे हैं इंडिया पाकिस्तान, उसमें पाकिस्तान के भी बहुत सारे लोगों का हाथ रहा उस आज़ादी को देने में, और जिस जिस डेमोक्रेसी की कल्पना की थी, जिन्होंने हमारे देश को ये किया कि भाई हमारा देश ऐसा होना चाहिए जिसमें पीस हो, जिसमें नॉन वायलेंस की मूवमेंट हो, जिसमें वायलेंस ना हो, महिलाओं का सम्मान हो और कम्युनलिज्म ना हो। सबसे पहला उदाहरण मैं देना चाहता हूँ कि स्टेट का क्या रोल होता है। जब इंडिया आज़ाद हुआ तब नोवाखली करके एक जगह है बंगाल में, वहाँ पे दंगे हो रहे थे और पूरा हिंदुस्तान आज़ादी का सेलिब्रेशन कर रहा था, उधर पाकिस्तान भी आज़ादी का सेलिब्रेशन कर रहा था। पर गांधी एक ऐसा व्यक्ति थे जो नोवाखली में जाके बैठे थे और कहा था कि ये कम्युनलिज्म जो है वो डेमोक्रेसी के लिए बहुत हानिकारक है, बहुत बहुत मुश्किल है। मैं उसके बाद का जो पीरियड है, क्योंकि गुजरात को ओवरऑल मेरी समझ से गुजरात को एक लेबोरेटरी की तहत यूज किया गया है। गुजरात इंडिया का एक स्टेट है और उसको एक लेबोरेटरी की तरह यूज किया गया है कम्युनल फोर्सेस ने, कि लोगों के अंदर नफरत कैसे पाली जाए। तो ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम दंगे होते रहे और उसका सबसे बड़ा जो एग्जाम्पल है वो 2002 के दंगे है, कि 2002 में जो स्टेट का रोल रहा है कि एक बार गोधरा की ट्रेन चली जिसमें 58 से 60 लोग मारे गए, और जो लोग जलाए गए या मारे गए उनकी पूरी डेड बॉडी को पूरे शहरों में आपने स्टेट ने उसको यात्राएं की उस डेड बॉडी के साथ, और लोगों की भावनाएं जो है वो हुई। और प्लस कि एट अ टाइम, मतलब शाम को ट्रेन चलती है या 27 तारीख फरवरी को 2002 में ट्रेन चली और उसके शाम को दंगे शुरू हो गए, तो कहीं ना कहीं ये देखा जाता है कि इट्स टोटली प्लान, कि जिसमें शहरों में हथियार पहुंचाए गए थे और उसमें सबसे ज्यादा जो परेशानियां हुई वो महिलाओं को हुई, क्योंकि महिलाएं कहीं भी दंगा होता है कम्युनलिज्म के नाम पे तो सबसे ज्यादा पीड़ित जो होती है वो महिलाएं होती है। रेप महिलाओं पे होते हैं, न्याय उनको नहीं मिलता है। अभी 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 का जो एग्जाम्पल दूं तो बिल्किस बानो जिनके ऊपर गैंगरेप हुआ था और उनके परिवार के 7 सदस्य को मार दिया गया था, जिसकी 3 साल की बेटी को उसके सामने पत्थर के ऊपर पटक के मार दिया गया था, और उस टाइम पे वो 3 महीने की प्रेग्नेंट थी बिल्किस बानो। उसके जो मुजरिम थे उनको गुजरात सरकार ने छोड़ दिया। तो ऐसे गुनहगारों को जो बलात्कार करते हैं उनको स्टेट अगर हमारे समाज में खुला छोड़ देती है तो बाकी महिलाओं की और बाकी लोगों की क्या सेफ्टी। एज ए ह्यूमन राइट पर्सपेक्टिव अगर हम देखें तो हमारी जो साउथ इंडियन कंट्री और उसमें मैं इंडिया की बात करूं तो ह्यूमन इंडेक्स में दिन ब दिन हम गिरते जा रहे हैं, मतलब हमारा जो रेशियो है वो कम होता जा रहा है। जो भी स्टेट के सामने आवाज उठाता है, जो भी स्टेट के सामने अपनी बात रखता है, लोगों के लिए लड़ता है, वो चाहे सीए एनआरसी का कानून हो, चाहे कृषि कानून के खिलाफ पूरे हिंदुस्तान के किसान लड़े, तो जो लोग लड़ने वाले हैं उनको पॉलिटिकल प्रिजनर बना के कई महीनों तक, कई सालों तक जेल में डाल दिया जाता है। ये जो है एक डेमोक्रेटिकल स्टेट का रोल नहीं हो सकता। एक लोकशाही देश में ये होना जो है वो आप पूरा प्रशासन का मिसयूज करके सत्ता चलाने की कोशिश करते हैं और डेमोक्रेसी के नाम पे ये जो बोलने वाले लोग हैं उनको अंदर करना, जो नौजवान लोग जो सवाल पूछते हैं उनको अंदर करना, जेलों में डाल के रखना तरह तरह के कानून के तहत, ये कहाँ की डेमोक्रेसी की बात है। तो डेमोक्रेसी को ज्यादा स्ट्रेंथन करने की बजाय जो सरकारें आती है, अभी जो फिलहाल सरकार है उससे पहले की सरकारों ने कुछ नहीं किया, ऐसा नहीं है। कोटा टाडा जैसे कानून पहले की सरकारें लाई थी, लोग लड़े, वो कानून रिपील हुए, पर उसमें जिन लोगों की जिंदगी जो है 15-15 साल जेलों में गई, 12-12 साल जो मुसलमानों की जिंदगी जेलों में गई, उनका कंपनसेशन कुछ नहीं है, मतलब उनकी जिंदगी तो बर्बाद हो गई। तो ऐसे हजारों नौजवान हैं। और मूल सवाल जो है, लड़ाई के जो मूल सवाल है कि आप अपने सवाल रख ना पाओ, अपने हक के लिए ना बोल पाओ, इसीलिए स्टेट हमेशा ये कोशिश करता रहा है कि आपको या तो कास्टिज्म में उलझा के रख दिया जाए या फिर आपको जो है कम्युनलिज्म में उलझा के रख दिया जाए कि फला रिलीजियस के लोग जो है वो आप अगर उनके साथ रहेंगे, उनके साथ नहीं रहेंगे तो आपके ऊपर अटैक कर देंगे। तो पूरा जो दो कम्युनिटी के बीच डिवीजन करके रूल करने की जो स्ट्रेटजी है, शायद उसमें आज की सरकारें कामयाब रही है। और हमारे जैसे जो लोग हैं, जो डेमोक्रेटिकल वॉइस के लिए, जो ह्यूमैनिटी के लिए, पीस के लिए जो बात करते हैं, उनके ऊपर अलग अलग तरीके से अटैक शुरू होते हैं और वो कहीं ना कहीं जेलों में जाके बंद होते हैं या कहीं ना कहीं उनको उनकी आवाज़ को दबाने की कोशिश की जाती है। तो ये पूरा का पूरा जो स्टेट का रोल है वो हमेशा लगता है कि इंडिया बहुत बड़ा डेमोक्रेटिकल वर्ल्ड का सबसे लार्जेस्ट डेमोक्रेसी है, पर उस डेमोक्रेसी में अगर हम प्रिंट आउट करें कि आदिवासियों के क्या हालात है, दलितों के क्या हालात है, मुसलमानों के क्या हालात है, तो सबके लिए जो है कानून आपको अलग अलग रवैया रखता हुआ दिखेगा। महिलाओं के लिए कानून अलग अलग रवैया, कानून सबके लिए एक होना चाहिए। ये डेमोक्रेटिकल वैल्यू की बात है। तो ये पूरा स्टेट का रोल जो है उसको ज्यादा मजबूत करने के लिए, ज्यादा डेमोक्रेसी को ज्यादा स्ट्रेंथन करने के लिए, जो जो डेमोक्रेटिकल वैल्यू पे यकीन करते हैं, जो पीस पे यकीन करते हैं, जो कम्युनल हार्मनी पे यकीन करते हैं, ऐसे लोगों का सत्ता में भागीदारी होना बहुत जरूरी है और ऐसे लोगों की राय जो है सरकारों को लेना बहुत जरूरी है, वो चाहे किसी भी कंट्री में हो, क्योंकि पीस जो है वो सबसे बड़ा हथियार है। अहिंसा जो है वो सबसे बड़ा हथियार है। हथियारों से किसी जंग, मतलब कहीं भी जंग नहीं जीती जा सकती है। अहिंसा ही एक ऐसा हथियार है कि जिसके ऊपर हम चल के लोगों में इंसानियत की बात कर सकते हैं। थैंक यू सो मच।
थैंक यू। नहीं, थैंक यू देव, बस कुछ मसाइल तो हमारे कॉमन हैं, एंड थैंक यू so much for being so articulate about this. Now I'll leave Pakistan for the last because we have two speakers from Pakistan. I want them to sort of complement each other in sort of one chunk. And I'll go to Tajul Islam from Bangladesh. And as I said in the introduction, Bangladesh perhaps is also unique in the sense that from its inception, the communal question, for want of a better word, was inescapable. And we saw in the constitution making, because you are an expert at Bangladesh constitution, that the attempt to make a secular, socialist, democratic constitution and country. And then we saw, and you're better placed to talk about how that struggle has panned out. So there was the attempt, at least the ambition of the state, to fight against or to be very aware of what communalism can bring, because as I said, that's where the journey begins in Bangladesh. So Tajul Islam Sahab, I would want over to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'll shortly speak on Bangladesh issue. According to Bangladesh constitution, Bangladesh is a secular liberal democracy. Secularism is a basic feature of our constitution, and any action or law which undermines the secular feature of the constitution shall be deemed unconstitutional. There is an article in our constitution, that is Article 12 of the constitution. It speaks, the principle of secularism shall be realized by the elimination of A, communalism in all its forms, B, the granting by the state of political status in favor of any religion, C, the abuse of religion for political purposes, and D, any discrimination against or persecution of persons practicing particular religion. Bangladesh is an unique country, and communal harmony is here. But problem is that our politicians, although our constitution is secular and there is a protection for the communities against communalism, but practically, and communalism, which is directly at odds with secularism, remains in all sectors. Basically, when the election comes, parliament election is held in every 5 years, and when the election comes, some people from the minority communities, they are asked not to go to the polling station. The fear is they may not vote for certain political group or for others. And during the last year, during 1 week time, from 13th October to 19th, there was a total 21 attacks on the temples and puja mandaps in as many as 13 districts. following a Facebook post demeaning the Holy Quran, and the state authorities failed to take appropriate measures. The problem is some unidentified from some unidentified Facebook IDs, there are some posts demeaning Holy Quran or Prophet or Muslim sentiments, and people rapidly see the post and become agitated, and thereafter they attack in the temples of the Hindus and Buddhist communities. Problem with the government is that they are not very serious to protect these minority temples, because they want to use it politically, because they want to witch hunt, they want to use these cases to harass the political opponents, and they are not interested to find out the actual perpetrators of this crime. So although the people of Bangladesh is very harmonious with the other religious communities, but because of the political will of the politicians and because of the political motive, ill motive, there are certain incidents happened in Bangladesh. And it is possible to eliminate all sorts of communalism from Bangladesh if there are political wills, and if the civil society and the NGOs act biaslessly and fair, then it is possible to eliminate communalism from Bangladesh. So for now, this is all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tajul Islam Sahab. And I'm hopefully we'll get a chance to get back to Bangladesh in the conversation. And now, sort of, I'll move to Pakistan. And maybe I'll start with Dr. Patras. Your work, and I mean, you've done work on communalism, on social harmony, and part of what I want you to sort of talk about or address is this intersectionality. We've so far talked about the ills that communalism brings to all minorities, etc. But there is a gendered lens to this kind of factionalization. We're seeing this in India, we've seen this in Pakistan, we've seen this really in the Western world as well. The rise of right-wing factionalism, the rhetoric of this, and often enabled by the state, comes with misogyny, comes with, so communalism makes all minorities worse off, makes everybody worse off really, apart from a tiny bit of the ascendant majority. But it makes women worse off. That's the feeling that we look at. But how does this intersection, looking at communalism, looking at polarization, looking at the rise of factionalism in Pakistan, do you think, does it in particular impact women or sort of, other marginalized groups, so the poor in particular? So I thought from an academic perspective, I'll go to you for that.
Thank you. Responding to your question, I think we first need to focus on the socio-religious fabric of the society we live in, which is very much determined by, divides. And these divides are emanating from many differentiations, be it on the basis of class, caste, gender, religion. And this, the intersectionality of all these divisions, whether we sometimes, there are structural differences, there are structural identities, they are also fluid. But then when they all combine, and obviously if you belong to a particular group which is already marginalized, then you also share a certain identity, like being a woman, a member of a minority group, and then you belong to a lower class. Then all the marginalities, they further reinforce deprivations. They further reinforce discriminations. So there is no rocket science in it to understand. But on the other, yes, gender is always a lens. It has to be there always, be it women in conflict, women of marginalized community. But I think you need to address the question of, when we are focusing on the question of state, like especially on the continuum of citizenship. Are we located on exclusion or inclusion? Or if citizenship has, it entails multiple rights, And for that, we need to go and study the Constitution of Pakistan that categorically defines non-religious minorities in Pakistan as non-Muslims. And you know, when you have certain institutionalization of religion in your state laws, policies, then you ought to create alienation among certain groups. And it is, it is not a surprising. We live in Lahore. You go and just walk around, and you can easily spot Christian settlements living in ghettos, in poor ghettos, not in, good ghettos, but poor ghettos. And majority, overwhelming majority of Christian community are working in sanitation services, and they are providing some very basic service, cleaning and all that. But why there is, more than 90% of workers in Lahore waste management, public hospitals, education, you look into any organization, you will always find more than 80 or 90% of sweepers belong to a certain minority community. So they have been marginalized to an extent. And this ghettoization itself leads to further marginalization. And several theories have attested this fact. When you live in a ghetto, you don't want to mingle. Is it because of fear? Is it because of your wounded experiences of discrimination on the basis of, caste, class, gender, religion, and whatever it is? So I think we need to look into that, when a state has a role to, although the Constitution also says, according to Article 36, that minorities, legitimate rights of minorities need to be protected and respected. And then we have been, thanks to civil society organizations in Pakistan and abroad, we have been raising voices against all these, bringing out the problems. And again, I would like you to, like the audience to focus, we should not get into the dichotomy of, yes or no. Achhi baat or buri baat. Because if we look problems from that myopic perspective, then definitely you ought to give more value to one over the other. And then it does translate into our, everyday realities. Either, as you are asking a specific question about gender, so we don't have a conducive environment for interfaith marriages, whereas we say that diversity बहुत अच्छा मंत्रा है, अच्छी बात है, diversity relationships में reflect करे, and it does, diversities की इतनी studies भी आई हैं. But at the same time, you need to see in our context, especially in interfaith marriages, especially when women are from the minority community, so she has to suffer a lot. I have, interviewed many women, and I have seen, although they have converted to majority faith, and to please their husbands and all that, but still within their everyday reality, there are questions that तुम मर जाओगी तो कौन तुम्हारा जनाजा पड़ेगा, हम क्या करेंगे? So there is, social alienation, social, these rifts are, we have to face interfaith hostilities in our context. So I think that is one, but on the other side, how this discourse is constructed, we need to focus on the, prevalence of insensitive material in school textbooks. We need to see that legal protections, our state providing legal protections. We are thankful to the state that recently they have made some, Christian Hindu marriage and Sikh act, but somehow the other rules of procedures are not made, so these laws are still not implemented. We have other problems relating to, Christian marriage, divorce, and other personal. So state has to provide legal protection. So these are the questions we keep raising, and sometimes state is receptive, and but the struggle is, it has to be continued.
Absolutely. I mean, and segueing from what Maheen, coming to you, because HRCP in particular sort of takes this broader lens as one, perhaps the only human rights organization who's taken this broader lens on Pakistan and for this, has institutional memory of how, for a long period of time. And when we talk about the role of state in otherizing the minorities and hence sort of enabling, encouraging, inciting communalism, are there discernible trends? Is it, so what, I mean, of it getting worse? Because Pakistan is, unlike, there have been watershed moments. We've talked about India, where it seems that, a switch has been flipped. And in Sri Lanka, there has been the war period. But in Pakistan, in recent years, do you think that we're seeing more and more of communalism? And is it circling to the question of the state? Are we seeing the state marginalizing, otherizing minorities in a systematic way? Is it on the increase?
I think what's happened is, first of all, the state has, from its inception, it has systematically and deliberately othered minorities. First of all, by ascribing a faith to the state in the first place. You have a situation in which even the right to profess your religion or to practice it is no longer something that is given freely, because the word freely was removed from Article 20 of the Constitution. The laws introduced during the 80s marginalizing the Ahmadiyya community are a point in case. Now that going forward, it has never been a priority for the state to protect the rights of minorities. And perhaps it has a vested interest in ensuring that communities are not allowed to profess the rights to which they are entitled to the Constitution. But the Jamaat-e-Ahmadiyya, which has effectively been disenfranchised by pushing on it the lack of an identity, by defining what a Muslim is or what a Muslim is not, has meant that it has now been, as you were saying, it has been ghettoized completely, both from political life and from the social fabric. And if any efforts the state has made recently have been met with protracted delays. The 2014 Supreme Court judgment, for example, which is a very good framework for countering communalism, it took 4 years for a commission to be set up for any kind of implementation of that judgment to come about. And that has still obviously not happened. And I think in recent years, the state having let this genie out of the bottle can no longer put it back in. I think over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, there has been a rise in communalism, in needing to promote your identity as based on faith. And part of the reason perhaps is that our political conversations incorporate this. I think it was perhaps in 2020, one of the ministers who disparaged the Hindu community, he was Fayaz Chauhan. He was removed and then brought back into the cabinet quite soon after. Now, when the political face of the state is intent upon communalizing its own citizens, how can it then expect that this will not feed into the social fabric and cause events where now mob violence is an accepted solution to any attempts made by, is an accepted solution to protecting the faith of the state?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think, the conversation, as the topic, the canvas is so broad, the issues so deep and so pressing that we could go on for forever, really. But we have, because of paucity of time, we've been told to wrap up. But I want to wrap up on the note of, it is all dire, bleak, and depressing, but that's not the note that I want to end on. I want each of you to just take about 1 minute maximum on what can be done, what needs to be done in each of your contexts. Because we do understand that the challenges are grave and the challenges are huge. But starting from you, Dev, in terms of what can we do to combat? What can you do? You are obviously doing a lot, but what needs to be done and done urgently to combat this? Over to you, Dev, briefly.
ये बात करनी है जो आपने कहा कि अब क्या कर सकते हैं स्टेट का मतलब मेरा ये सुझाव है हर स्टेट को जहाँ पे कम्युनलिज्म के इश्यू है रेसिज्म के इश्यू है कि स्टेट का सबसे पहला जो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होता है वो ये होता है कि उस देश की जो माइनॉरिटी है वो दलित हो वो मुसलमान हो वो महिलाएं हो वो आदिवासी हो उन सबको प्रोटेक्ट करना और उस देश का जो मेजोरिटी ऑफ पीपल है मेजोरिटी के जो लोग हैं जो हिंदुस्तान में हिंदू है पाकिस्तान में मुसलमान है उस तरह बाकी देशों में जो जो मेजोरिटी के लोग हैं उनको माइनॉरिटी के हक के लिए खड़ा होना ये सबसे बड़ा सॉल्यूशन है अगर ये होना शुरू हुआ तो कम्युनलिज्म खत्म होगा कम्युनलिज्म के सामने लड़ना बहुत आसान होगा हर लोगों को ये अपील है मेरी कि आप अपनी देश की माइनॉरिटी के लिए आवाज उठाना शुरू कीजिए उनके हक के लिए लड़ना शुरू कीजिए और दूसरा जो स्टेट अपना रोल नहीं निभाती है डेमोक्रेटी को या सेक्युलरिज्म को स्ट्रेंथन करने में उनको कैसे अकाउंटेबल किया जाए उनको अकाउंटेबल करने के लिए बहुत सारे तरीके हैं मतलब प्रोटेस्ट भी होनी चाहिए एडवोकेसी भी होनी चाहिए और भी मतलब हर तरीके की लड़ाई जो है वो लड़ाई वो सेक्युलरिज्म के नाम पे हो उसमें स्ट्रेंथन करने के लिए खड़ा रहने के लिए अपनी तादाद बढ़ानी पड़ेगी और ऐसे लोगों को लड़ना पड़ेगा जो लोग आज चुप है या डरे हुए हैं सबसे पहले अपना डर निकालना पड़ेगा स्टेट के खौफ से मतलब स्टेट आपको जेल में डाल देगा क्या फर्क पड़ेगा पर लड़ेंगे ये खौफ जब निकल जाएगा तो कम्युनलिज्म के सामने आसानी से लड़ा जा सकता है थैंक यू सो मच
Thank you. Shreen, same question. It is in what can we do? There is a diagnosis of the problem, what needs to be done we can make demands of states, but at the level of the human rights community, at the level of the civil society, at the level of the people, what needs to be done?
Sorry, I'm going to be very forthright on this issue. As South Asian, we have completely failed supporting each other. In your country and my country, you have a blasphemy law. I have a Prevention of Terrorism Act. India has ASPA, where we make these others terrorists, the others traitors, the others fascist now. Right now in Sri Lanka, the people who protested and ousted the president are fascist. They are being arrested under Prevention of Terrorism Act. What are we doing as South Asian? Are we looking at these laws? Are we fighting with our government to change these laws? Right? Oftentimes, we are completely failing to look at these things. And Sri Lanka is a good example to all of you all. How governance failure, systemic way of oppressing the minorities have resulted Sri Lanka to suffer collectively. Right? We are suffering collectively. I was surprised when the COVID time, when Sri Lanka brought in a mandatory cremation only policy for the Muslims. How many Muslim countries raised this issue? That is clear-cut violation of freedom of religion, right? So these are issues that we as South Asians have to come together to put pressure on our government. Sri Lanka has taken the ICCPR, a very good governance that came from the UN system in 2007, and now localizing the ICCPR Section 3 and locking up people who are reacting to anti-Muslim sentiment. People who are memorializing their dead ones are being locked up under ICCPR using combination of ICCPR and Prevention of Terrorism Act. We need to look at this whole terrorism jargon and national security jargon very carefully and collate with our government and make sure that this does not happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, Tajul Islam, largely same question. What's the way forward? What's the way forward in terms of civil society, in terms of, for you, the legal community, for lawyers? What are responsibilities that we have or things that we can do to combat this?
Firstly, I'm fully agreeing with Ms. Shreen Saroor, and I want to add something for Bangladesh perspective. the elimination of communalism, first thing is necessary in Bangladesh is the political will. Government is to decide whether it will use communalism as a political weapon against the political opponents. And the other steps the government may take, the massive awareness and education programs should be undertaken by the state with a view to making the ordinary people free from communal passion. Mutual tolerance and respect for religious and ethnic differences should be inculcated among the citizens from a very young age. Appropriate curriculum should be introduced in schools so that the children are able to appreciate the importance of living in a society free from shackles of communalism, bigotry, and prejudice. And the independent investigating authority must be set up for investigating the offenses of communal violences. And the trial of these criminal activities should be tried in some speedy tribunals. Civil society and the NGOs have ample role to play because the role of the NGOs and civil society organizations are not free from any bias in Bangladesh. So we have the role of the government, we have the role of the civil societies, we have the role of the medias. Everybody is to play their neutral role for eliminating the communalism from Bangladesh. Although Bangladesh is a country of communal harmony, but because of the lack of the political will of the politicians, the situation is become worsened in Bangladesh. So it is the politicians who are to take decision whether they want to eliminate the communalism from the country or not. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Patras, Maheen, very quickly, last words. Yeah, what needs, I mean, it's very broad. It's
Obviously very broad in 1 or 2 seconds. Engagement with state needs to be done. We need to make use of all the available remedies. We need to keep raising these questions with states. Either these questions are difficult or easy ones. So engagement with state through cooperation needs to be, I think, carried out. And the second thing, we need to construct environment where people can utilize their political agency and come out of their victimhood, ghettos.
I think I will end very briefly by recording something that Ayra once said, that the measure of the state is how it treats its women, its children, and its minorities. It is therefore incumbent upon the state, given that it has a ready-made framework to implement the Gilani judgment and ensure that measures such as whether it is setting up police task force to protect places of worship, whether it is removing hate content from textbooks, is done. But at the same time, as a South Asian, and this is an entirely personal point of view, as a South Asian, I think it is incumbent upon all of us to also introspect on what is happening across borders. So as a Pakistani, I should be able to analyze or examine what is happening to minorities in all other South Asian countries, and I would expect that South Asians across the border have the right to do the same as well, without that being put down to political agendas and treated in a very loaded way.
Sir, मेरा मैम सवाल मैम प्राचा से है. Ma'am, we talk about that Muslims are being killed in India. We talk about the rights of Muslims in India. But here in Pakistan, we see that 6,000 people have been killed in the name of Allah in just 25 years. And ma'am, if in Pakistan, minorities are not safe. Ma'am, you see that Christian women are being trafficked to China for prostitution. And if women's minorities are not safe here in Pakistan, have we right to talk about that that Muslims are being killed in India? And secondly, that many ethnic and religious groups, they are made by actually political parties to gain some political benefits. So, ma'am, I want to ask that what is the role of state to promote communalism? And secondly, I want to ask that if minorities are not safe here, then have we right to talk against India that people are being killed in the name of sects there? So, thank you.
I think everyone has a right to free speech. और हर किसी की मर्जी है वो जो बात करना चाहे. और जब हम कहते हैं कि हम अपनी ऑपरेशंस में भी एक सॉलिडारिटी बिल्ड करें एक दूसरे के साथ, एक कि अगर वहाँ भी कोई प्रॉब्लम है तो हम उसकी कोई ओलंपिक्स या सफरिंग्स में कोई कंपटीशन नहीं होना चाहिए. वहाँ ज़्यादा है, यहाँ कम है, या उससे कम है. There is no competition among in sufferings. इसके साथ साथ हम साउथ एशियन एक पूरा एक रीजन है, इसमें ये क्वेश्चन ऑफ माइनॉरिटीज़ तमाम स्टेट्स में है, तो मेरे ख्याल से इस पे बातचीत तो करते रहना चाहिए. हम ये नहीं स्पीच को बंद कर सकते हैं कि पहले हम इसको डील करें फिर हम उधर जाएं. इट इज़ नॉट अ काइंड ऑफ लीनियर थिंग. वो हर इंसान का अपना फ्रेम है कि उसने किस तरह अपने अल्फाजों को लेना है, किस चॉइस ऑफ वर्ड्स में जाना है और किस तरह एड्रेस करना है अपनी प्रॉब्लम को. कम्युनलिज्म को मेरे ख्याल से कंट्रोल करने में कि इस तरह की आइडियोलॉजी ना बन जाए जो मज़ीद डिवाइसिव हो, जो लोगों को डिवाइड करे और हायरार्की में प्लेस करे कि आप अच्छे, किसी की रेशियल प्रोफाइलिंग ना हो जाए, कि इस तरह के कोई कानून नहीं बनना चाहिए, कोई ऐसी पॉलिसीज़ नहीं आनी चाहिए जो तबकात को और उनको रंग और नस्ल के तफरके को और सामने लेकर आए. तो ये स्टेट की तो जिम्मेदारी हमेशा रहती है, हमारा कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है स्टेट का. इक्वल सिटीजनशिप के क्वेश्चन को मेरे ख्याल से रिविजिट करने की दोबारा ज़रूरत है और ये स्ट्रगल कंटिन्यू रहनी चाहिए.
Thank you so much. I mean, my apologies. We'll not be able to take more questions because we're running late, and the panelists and for the other sessions would have to wait. But we are very absolutely delighted to have had this opportunity to have this conversation, albeit cut short, given the importance and significance of the topic. So, to Maheen, to Dr. Patras, to Dev, to Shreen, to Tajul Islam, we are very thankful, we are very grateful. To you all, we are very grateful. And thank you.